Welcome to Mystical Messages. I am Hillary Harley, your podcast host. I am a soul guide and astrologer. Mystical Messages is your podcast gateway to discover and learn about the realm beyond the veil, including all things intuitive, metaphysical, and the healing arts. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hillaryharley.com. Today, I am so delighted to have my very special guest, Leah Goldman of FIKA Coaching, join me to learn more about her work as an equine coach and human developer. So welcome to you, Leah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I get too far in, I just want to make sure I share all of your business information. It's FIKA Coaching, and FIKA is spelled FIKA, and it's FIKA Coaching, Leah Goldman, and it's FIKA Coaching, FIKA coaching.com, or contact at FIKA Coaching, FIKA coaching.com, or on Instagram, FIKA Coaching. So, Leah, it is such a joy to have you here. I am so looking forward to exploring how your journey unfolded as an equine coach. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you began in this miraculous field that you're working in.
Okay. How much time do you have, Hillary?
All day, if necessary.
Okay. All right. Well, I have to take you back to when I was 6 years old. That's when it all started, or at least that's where my interest in horses really began. And it's my earliest memory of asking my parents if I could learn how to ride a horse, and they're very generous and gracious in finding that for me. So I'm not sure, if I saw horses on TV or, out a car window, but there was something that really drew me to wanting to be with them from a very, very early age, and other animals as well. I had a lot of bunnies growing up, and at one point, my mom actually was away on vacation, and I convinced my dad to go get a dog. And so we did that.
Oh, boy.
Animals have always been a large part of my life. But the other piece of that growing up and from an early age, trying to figure out what it is you want to do. And I very much thought that I was on the path to becoming an educator. Mm-hmm. Most of my mom's side of the family are educators, teachers, counselors, coaches, and I felt connected to that line of work. And I first went to college. I studied early education, but very quickly realized that that was not for me.
Oh, yeah. Early education can be sort of a tricky field, especially now these days.
That's true. So what I did really like were the psychology classes that were part of the curriculum.
Oh.
So I did what every parent dreams of for their child, which is change their major and transfer schools.
But if it works, it works, right?
It works, right? That question of what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that psych degree? So I also learned through college and, through professors that if you want to work in that field, you have to have a master's degree at a minimum.
Oh, for sure.
So I did that immediately upon graduating with my bachelor's. And I actually did a dual degree. So I did one degree in clinical mental health and the other in school guidance counseling. So still very much a draw to working with children and being in schools. And I found myself doing that for about 7 years. And life took its first turn and I left the school. Yeah. And ended up actually going into our family business, which is a multi-purpose health club in the South Shore of Massachusetts. And it was perfect timing. My sister, who also works here, was going out on maternity leave, and my parents needed somebody to take over the marketing and the advertising. So I said, okay. So in I went with absolutely no business experience, no marketing degree, and just kind of put boots on the ground and figured it out as I went.
Yeah, but as you and I have talked earlier, psych is a really useful degree to have with any kind of business, because there's marketing and sales is rooted in what the people want. And so I have found with clients in particular that they think psych is limited to being a psychologist or whatever. But, there's a whole practice of business psychology. Marketing and sales is what do the people want? And so it's really important for, understanding the nature of people's desires and motivations.
Absolutely. And it was really great at first because the learning curve was so steep
for you.
I really enjoyed learning something completely different. And after about 6 years, the questions started to happen where I wasn't finding myself fulfilled. It wasn't very joyful to work. And I started sort of contemplating the idea of going back to help people in some capacity, which health does in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Not quite in the way that I was wanting.
Right.
And then my world blew up.
And I do want to just pause and say, this is part of the healing journey for, it doesn't, you don't have to be a healer necessarily, but we're all here on earth as spiritual beings. And there aren't mistakes. There are no mistakes in life. It's, there are doorways and thresholds that we have to cross. And as I love to say to people, Carl Jung, famously said, everything until 40 is learning. And after 40, we apply all the wisdom. And so for the healer in particular, there can be crises that arise that say, okay, now what? And it's time to dig deeper. Yep. So, how did you pivot from that?
Yeah. So I'll share this very briefly just because your listeners might resonate with it in some capacity. But what had happened was I was in a relationship that I thought was sort of the one, if you will.
Yep.
And I received a Facebook message from another woman saying, just want to let you know, the person that you've been in a relationship with for the last 3 years, I have also been in a relationship with. And she had just discovered it as well. So that is what stopped me in my tracks and sort of blew everything up, because I had been in this one track mindset of find your person, get married. We met when we were 30. Everybody around me was engaged, starting their families, right?
Yeah.
Very specific track that many women are on at that age, because there's so much pressure around you from your family, from society, from all of the messaging that we get as women, that you have to be married and start your family by a certain time.
Yep.
And so when this happened to me, it was, now looking back, of course, it's the best gift I could have ever been given. Right. But at the time, it was so devastating, and the betrayal and the shock of it all and the hurt. And there was just so much unpacking that had to be done over the course of many years, by the way. This was not something that, I was over, and done with, within a few months. This was a long time, and it's part of the journey, right? It's part of how I got to where I am. And at that time, horses had not been in my life for several years. So, growing up, I rode them recreationally and competitively, and I was really just missing being in the vicinity with horses. And so, no joke, 2 weeks before I got that message, I had signed on to lease a horse for the summer.
Oh my gosh. Talk about divine guidance. Wow.
Absolutely. And not only that, where this horse was on somebody's private property, right? It's just their home that happens to have a small barn. And so for me, who was in such a state of grief, to be able to go spend time with this horse in a setting that was quiet and peaceful, and whether I rode or didn't, it was such a healing space.
Right. It wasn't a stable where you had to go in and interact with other
Correct.
clients or horse owners or stable owners or anything. You could just go and hang with this horse. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it really started to shift the way that I thought about horses, because up until that point, everything was about competition and doing things the right way, and here I am in this space, and I'm, just able to just be.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. There was Finley, who's the horse that I had leased. And then there was her little pony sidekick. So I just, some days I didn't ride, and I would just sort of get to be there and collect my thoughts and grieve how I needed to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And, I accredit that horse to sort of cracking me open to this, as well as my dog, who unfortunately passed 2 years ago. But the structure of having a dog helped me move forward so much, right? You have to get up, you have to get out of bed, you have to take care of something outside of yourself.
I have heard that from more people with dogs in particular, post 9/11, people that purchased dogs and they got them out and about and up. And I know I went through a bout of depression in 2007 for 4 months. And right before, similarly, before the depression set in, we had adopted a puppy about 6 weeks before. And if I didn't have Daisy, our dog, to get up and take out and make sure, and housebreaker and do all the things that are required, take her to puppy kindergarten. It really was a salvation. So that's miraculous.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, people often say it's like dogs know, right? They know when you're grieving, they know when you're sad. My dog would get up and go into the other room. I was like, where? And I thought this was supposed to be this miraculous thing where my dog knows I'm upset and she's here to comfort me. But it actually was sort of kind of this subtle message of get it together a little bit. So I will give her credit for that as well, is that she was there, but she also gave me some moments to be okay, it's time to pick your head up. It's time to get outside, go for a walk. So towards the end of that summer, I had already been in that headspace of, is working at the health club really what I want to do long term, and sort of this desire to go back to helping people. And I said, wow, well, what if I could help people like me who are struggling and just going through something, and I can somehow integrate, horses and dogs and animals.
Yeah.
And so
one step leads to another.
That was the idea. And from there, I just sort of launched into a research phase. And as you said, was sort of divinely guided by meeting certain people who told me about certain programs. One piece just started to fall into place after the next.
Now, you're an equine coach. So one thing I definitely want to go over and make sure we clarify the difference, because I think people are very familiar with animal therapy and what the difference is between equine therapy and equine coaching, which is what you are certified to do.
Correct. Yeah. And so with that dual master's, I had the ability to become a licensed therapist and have my own equine therapy practice, but it's actually not the direction I wanted to go in. And there's a very specific reason for that, which was that I felt largely like there wasn't access to horses for sort of the quote unquote everyday person who might just be going through a couple of hard things, or some aspect of their life just isn't going super well. The world of equine therapy typically, depending on the program, there's a significant diagnosis that a person has to qualify in order to be a part of that program. So there's some amazing therapeutic farms out there that work with kids with autism, or they work with veterans with PTSD, addiction, or, you have what we call hippotherapy, which is basically physical therapy on horses, right? So that requires application. It requires a doctor's referral. A lot of programs are just for kids and not necessarily for adults. And so I really felt compelled to create a space for that sort of person in the middle, right? Don't meet the criteria of equine therapy, but then there's no other option for them to spend time with horses and build a relationship in that way. So to answer your question, the best way to describe the difference is that therapy really focuses on where you've been, and coaching focuses more on where you're going.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So giving you tools and steps to focus on building toward your future and what outcomes and results that you want to achieve.
Yes. And with coaching, it's not that we don't spend time talking about the past, because the past is very important. It informs how you got to where you are today. It's just that we don't spend a lot of time unpacking all of the things that happened in the past. Or about information gathering and, okay, how do we use this information to figure out what isn't serving you any longer and how we can get you in a forward moving direction. And the other difference I would say is that, as my time as a school guidance counselor, so many times kids were sent to me not by choice. Kind of had to be there. And there's an impact in that relationship because they're not committed. They don't want to be there. They don't want to talk to you. So I largely felt like I really wanted to work with a population of people who were sort of ready and willing to commit to the process of change and growth.
That is a huge difference.
Yes. Yes. And I should also be clear that I don't work with kids. I only work with adults.
Okay. Yeah, that is a very important distinction. So how then did you took certification classes, and then how did you find Saint?
Yes.
Because Saint is the coaching horse that you work with.
He is. He's my number one go-to. I do have some other horses in the herd that don't technically belong to me, but they belong to some of my barn mates who have graciously allowed me to partner with their horses as well, which is really nice because there's so much learning to be done when you're paired with different horses. But yeah, so I have my 2 master's degrees, and those backgrounds certainly help, no question about it. And then I enrolled in an accredited coaching program. So I'm a professional certified coach under the ICF, which is basically a governing body of coaches.
Okay.
So I am now at their sort of second tier. The next level is to be a master coach, and that takes quite some time to get to that.
Okay.
I also took a course at the University of Denver, or Denver University, I should say.
DU, yeah. That's a great school.
Such a cool program out there where they have it's called the Institute for Human-Animal Connection.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, and it's part of their Graduate School of Social Work.
Okay.
So they have some certification courses that you can take and sort of how to incorporate animals into a business, whether that be a 501c or something like I'm doing, or an equine therapy practice. So I just kind of started doing all these different things, and Saint came to me, believe it or not, through a Facebook post.
Oh, Facebook has been instrumental in your life.
It really has.
It's amazing.
Yes.
Wow.
So I joined a group where you could put a post up about, a horse you are looking for, or vice versa. People that are selling can sort of post an advertisement. And I put out, hey, I'm looking for a therapeutic horse. I don't have many requirements except that they need to be a horse that's able to work with multiple people. Some horses are one-person horses, and they don't like being handled by a lot of people.
Right. Oh, for sure. For sure. So
go ahead.
No. So how did you and Saint meet? I mean,
Yes.
how did that all go down?
So
Because
I put out this post, and this woman reached out and she said, "I think I have the perfect horse for you." I said, "Okay, tell me about him." And she sent me some photos, and my heart sort of skipped a beat because when I was probably starting at 12 years old, early adolescent, I had sort of this dream of someday owning my own horse, this is very specific, who was a warm blood, which is a breed of horse.
okay, yeah, I was going to ask. So he's not a quarter horse, not a thoroughbred, not, Clydesdale.
Right.
He's a warm
He's
blood.
Yes, and more specifically, he is what is called an Oldenburg warm blood, which comes from Lower Saxony, Germany, and originally these horses were bred to be carriage horses. So very long necks, very long heads, big, powerful, able to pull some weight.
Very specific, I
Very
should say.
specific. So I was, had this dream as a kid. I want a warm blood. I want a male horse, a gelding. I want to be chestnut in color. I want him to have a white blaze and white socks. And I want him to be 16 to 16.2 hands tall.
Which is big. I mean, that's a big horse.
It's big. I like big horses and I like big dogs. I have Bernese mountain dogs. So what can I say? I don't know what it is.
And so that's what Saint is?
So this woman says, "I think I have the perfect horse for you." And I say, "Okay," and so she sends me a couple photos and I'm like, oh,
your heart skips a beat.
I'm like, this is the horse. Every single descriptor matches what I have been saying since I was 12 years old. And then of course, she's messaging me and I go, "What's his name?" Right? Because she doesn't say his name originally. And she says, "It's Saint." And I'm like, oh, does it get any more perfect than that?
Wow. So let's hear it for setting intentions and manifestation of those intentions.
Absolutely.
Somebody actually told me yesterday, or no, it was on Friday last week, 60% of people, when you set intentions, you have a 60% greater chance of manifesting than if you do not. So, it's power of prayer, power of focus, power of setting intentions and goals.
Right.
I mean, that's really remarkable.
Right. And to not give up on those, right? So that's something I had said when I was 12. He came to me when I was 35.
So that's when you're ready. That's when you were ready to receive.
Right. So I knew it before I even met him that he was going to be my horse, but I did the very practical, logical thing of making sure to test drive a few other horses just to be sure. And ultimately, he was the one.
Yeah. Well, and it's smart, as you say, to test drive because you're unlike a car. I mean, some people would disagree with me, but you're really in a relationship with that horse and that pet or animal, whatever animal it is that you bring into your life. I mean, that is a huge commitment. Mm-hmm. So how did that initial phase go with Saint? You learning about him and him learning who you were and how you functioned?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you sort of a funny story, a little anecdote of the day we trailered him from Maine to Ipswich. And the barn manager and a couple of other people were there and were ready to unload him from the trailer. And we're all sort of like on guard, right? Like, we don't know how this horse is going to react, how he's going to back out of the trailer. He's in a new place. And when I tell you, he walked off the trailer so slowly, it was like you had to encourage, and not because he was scared, just because he was so chill. And he just had a care in the world. And we opened up the barn door and let him into a stall. And he just walked right in and started eating hay. And we were like, okay, wow, very anticlimactic.
Wow. Meant to be. I'm home.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, Saint did come with some injuries and we did some initial blood work and he had Lyme disease and, had to be put on medication. And, our relationship really started building with me just sitting in the field with him, because
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I got him also was just to ride recreationally, go for some trail rides and things like that. And I
Yep.
couldn't do that. He needed a lot of rehab. He needed to be hand walked. And so him and I
Wow.
got to know each other just through being together.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of doing, a lot of being.
Did you have second thoughts, that he needed? Never. Okay. Like this was more than you bargained for, or not what you had signed up for, or not what was
Never.
promised.
And I should also say that he was actually gifted to me. So when
my heavens.
went up and shared with his owner at the time what my intentions were, and I met him and I rode him, and I was driving back from Maine, and she texted me and she said, "I love what you're doing. I just want you to have him."
Oh my heavens. Talk about the heavens literally opening up for you and paving your way. I mean, that is incredible.
Yeah.
So meant to be.
Yeah. And introducing him to other people, that was a different part of our relationship, right? That was growing. It's okay. We've spent this time together, and now I need you to spend time with other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And seeing him and learning very quickly, him and I are actually, at the beginning, we were mirrors of each other.
Okay. Oh.
Which is often the case, right? People often buy animals or they get an animal, or an animal comes to them who is just like them, right? Or sometimes it's the polar opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So always a lesson to be learned. And in this case, him and I were real mirrors of each other. So we're kind of independent, right? We can function by ourselves or in a group. Guarded, takes a little bit of time to trust, right? Wanting to please, I could go on and on, all the things, that I've discovered about myself through my own partnership with him. And what's been amazing to see is the layers that he had built up over the years, because he's now, we think, 21 or 22. It's hard to know. He doesn't have papers or anything like that.
Right.
Like that.
But he's been on a journey, certainly.
Exactly, on his own journey, right? And so I know at one point he was a police horse. I know at one point he was, a competitive show horse.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are in those types of jobs, everything that you're being asked to do is because the human is asking you to do it.
Right. Right.
There's no free will, when he's doing those things. And then he came up with an injury that's chronic, but is manageable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he couldn't do those things anymore. And so now he's in, what I sort of call his second act.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, to your point, we are living long and longer lives now. And so we have these distinct phases, chapters, whatever you want to call them, in some case, whole books of our lives that conclude, and we're on to the next book or chapter. Right. And so this, the path between the two of you opened up simultaneously, and you were brought together. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. So walk me and the listeners through what a session can look like, what a client might come to you with. I'm sure it varies widely depending on their individual backgrounds and needs, but what that sort of looks like.
Sure. So first and foremost, the majority of clients that come to me, well, I really shouldn't say majority, all of the clients that come to me have always been intrigued by or have wanted to spend time with horses in some capacity. Mm-hmm. They had previously, learned how to ride, and they missed being around horses. And I should say too, that everything we do is on the ground. So none of my clients ride the horses. Everything is on the ground.
That's a very important distinction.
Yes. And there's a very important reason for that, because when I'm asking as a coach powerful questions that, are to spark the client into some deep thinking, but you're sitting on the horse going, what do I do with my legs? What do I do with my hands? Where am I supposed to look? How do I turn?
That's a whole process unto itself.
It doesn't work. And there's so much that you can learn from just observation. So the first, that's one piece of it, is that clients are drawn to horses to begin with. The second piece is what I've already mentioned, is that they have a desire and a willingness to commit to this process and to change their life, because what they have been doing is no longer working for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also get a lot of clients that are sort of in their quote unquote second acts of life as well.
Right.
So when a client comes, and I'll sort of jump ahead and sort of skip the initial session, which is a lot of me talking and explaining things. But once a client is sort of immersed in the process, every session is intuitively guided, because when I originally started, I would go into planner mode, right? Okay, we're going to do this exercise. We're going to do this today, that today. And I very quickly learned that I would 95% of the time be throwing that whole plan out the window because not what the client needed. Whatever way that they were showing up that day would shift the session into a completely different direction. So I kind of freewheel it, to be honest now. That being said, I always have sort of a variety of exercises or things to do in my back pocket, should they make sense and should they apply to that session. But
that is a very helpful description, because if you're, freewheeling or not, it's allowing for the incredibly creative, intuitive process to unfold as the client needs. And how does Saint, this is really not just the client and the horse. This is three of you working together.
Yes. And when I first brought him home, I contacted an animal communicator just so I could learn more about him. And then I had a follow-up call maybe 6 months to a year later. And the word that Saint used, because I sort of asked, what does he think about this work that we're doing? Does he enjoy it? Those types of questions. And he came up with this word, which was that it is a teamship.
Oh, I love it.
Yes.
You should coin that.
Coin it. I know. I got to trademark it.
Trademark it. Exactly.
Yes. And it really is. The relationship doesn't work unless all three of us are invested and committed to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So energetically, the other thing that really factors into the direction of a session is sort of how the client shows up and sort of how the horses are responding to the client's own energy. So horses, as animals of prey, their energetic field and their senses expand out 1/2 mile.
That's huge. I mean, I think human energy fields extend 6 to 10 feet. Mm-hmm. 1/2 mile.
1/2 mile.
Wow.
So oftentimes your car pulls in through the gate, the horses already know you're there. They don't have to see you to know that you're there.
Wow.
And this is just, it's safety, right? This is all about safety, because should there be a real danger or a real threat, right? If a horse was in a wild and some predator was coming, to get the horse for lunch or dinner, they need that time to start running.
Right.
So that 1/2 mile radius is so that they can, survive.
Yep. So when they smell smoke and they know the fear instinct or the fight or flight instinct really kicks in for the horse.
Yes. And that's why horses sleep standing up as well, because the time take for them to actually get up and move off could cost them their life.
I never knew that. Okay.
They will lay down and snooze and take a nap if they feel safe. If they feel safe enough to do that, then they will lay down and sleep. But for the most part, you'll see horses sleeping standing up.
Okay. I rode when I was young quite a bit, and my kids have ridden, and one went to a horse camp over, summer. And I've spent some quality time around horses, and I never knew that was the reason. Okay. All right. So then how does the horse connect one-on-one with the client?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Right. So the number one thing that horses care about outside of their safety is congruence. So and this is whether you're a human member of the herd or you're a horse member of the herd, the intention that you have internally needs to match what's happening externally. So I'll give you a really great example of this. I was working with a client about a year ago, and when she first came, she would show up and she'd say, "Oh, things are great. Things are great. Things are fine. This week has been awesome." And Saint would turn and walk away, and he would go stand and hide behind a tree.
Oh boy.
This is my favorite anecdote. And she'd say, "What's happening?" And I said, "Well, he's mirroring you." She said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, he doesn't believe you." There's like no nicer way to say it, right? I'm like,
right. Well, it's true.
What you're saying on the outside is not matching how you're actually feeling on the inside. So you hiding, right, behind that mask, he's doing the same thing. So when you're ready to share and open up, he will come out.
That is remarkable.
And he did. Several sessions later, he did.
And horses in general, animals across the board, dogs, horses, they are such truth tellers. I mean, there's no bullshitting.
You cannot lie to them. So the way that I describe it is that horses will mirror back to you exactly who you are, minus the limiting stories that you tell yourself.
Okay.
Right. So, for example, I really want the horse to like me. Mm-hmm. You're looking at the horse. What is telling you right now that they don't like you? Right. And then they kind of look and they go, "Well, I guess nothing." Right. So then there's an opportunity to expand there. How has that story not served you throughout your life? You walk into a room of people and, "Oh, I want everyone to like me." Where has you and where has that not? So there's so many, from minor to major, teachable moments. And in a session, the best way to discover those is actually through observation. So where many equine facilitated learning programs focus on a variety of hands-on specific exercises, I tend to veer in the other way, because while those exercises or activities can be really awesome and you can get great learning and insights from them, they're also distracting.
Okay.
Because you're focused on a very specific and certain outcome when you're doing hands-on activities. So there's absolutely a time and a place for those, especially if it resonates with whatever the dialogue is that we're having.
Right.
More often than not, what I find is that our biggest discoveries come from sitting outside in the field, because you're also looking out, right, into nature. So there's an expansiveness and a clarity that you can get that sometimes is really hard to get when you're sitting in four walls.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah. Nature, it just opens up exponentially. I mean, what is possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And then a really cool thing that happens is that horses have the ability to sync their heartbeats with ours from up to 4 feet away.
Oh my heavens. Okay, this I never knew either. That's remarkable.
So there's been a lot of research done through HeartMath. So if people want to check that out, they can check out HeartMath.
Yeah, I've heard of HeartMath, but I don't fully understand it. But that's remarkable. So they
have some device or something that they use to figure this out. And it goes, again, back to the horse being a prey animal, because when you're in a group, if one of the horse's heart rates shoots up, it sort of alerts the next horse and then the next horse and then the next horse. So they all kind of know that, hey, it's time, we gotta bolt.
So again, the fighter survival.
It's survival, and it also has the opposite effect. So people, they can't always explain it, right? They go, when I come here, I just feel so grounded. I feel so calm. So what they don't realize is happening is the horse is actually sort of enveloping them in their own energetic field, and they're lowering the person's heart rate, and they're lowering the horse's blood pressure, they're lowering the client's heart rate and the client's blood pressure.
Right.
And so that's happening whether the client knows it or not. Right. And then when, if a horse spooks and they startle or they start to run, you also feel those physical sensations at the same time as well. So you're all connected, in the herd. Whether there's a fence, doesn't matter if there's a fence there or not. You can be inside the fence with them or outside of it. you're still in the energetic field.
That is remarkable to know. That is, yeah. Yeah. I mean, that it makes a lot of sense why animals bring our blood pressure down, because we're just in a rhythm that is not tied to something in the mundane or the ordinary world where, it's nature. So how many sessions on average do people typically have with you?
So there's a minimum requirement of 8 sessions for the equine coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And that is largely because it takes about 4 sessions to just start to build the relationship.
Right.
So on average, people will do anywhere from, I'd say the minimum I've had is somebody who has and successfully completed is 12.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have clients who are just come on like a maintenance as needed basis, who have been with me for, well over a year or so, or some on almost 2 years at this point.
Wow. And what, is there a favorite part of what the outcomes yield, or favorite part of your job that you have?
Oh gosh.
Being in nature.
Yeah. I mean, the farm is my office is basically, my favorite part, right? Because I leave feeling calm and I leave feeling grounded. But I would say my favorite part is working with every client that I have, because every client that I have is so committed to their own journey. Mm-hmm. And such a beautiful thing for me to witness and to get to be a part of. And some of my clients now are doing some amazing things. And to know that, Saint in particular has had such an impact on their life. I mean, the amount of homes that a photo of Saint lives in is, it's amazing. I get people, I got an email the other day. I keep a postcard of Saint in my car,
my
is the lock screen on my phone. So know the impact that he is making and that the horses are making is probably my favorite part of the job.
Wow. That's like when you go to the pediatrician's office and you see all the babies all over
right. The holiday cards on
the holiday cards. Exactly. And, you had mentioned in a previous conversation that we had that Saint is now delving into mediumship.
Yes.
And how does that work and look like?
Yeah. So I'll sort of backtrack a little bit. I started getting readings, whether it be from a medium or a psychic in my early 20s, kind of, on your birthday for fun with some girlfriends. And throughout the years, I've actually had many other people in that world tell me that I had these abilities. And I'd sort of laugh and go, okay, yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. And after the relationship ended, now 4 years ago, something cracked open with my dog that I had at the time. And I started noticing at that point that my senses were opening up.
Mm-hmm.
And so my first dog is really what sort of cracked me open to it. And then, every year I'd get a reading and, hey, did you know that you have the ability to do this? And hey, do you have the, when are you going to start doing this?
Right. Like, what's taking you so long?
And so many of us, we all have that imposter syndrome of like, there's no way that I can do that. There's no way that I have the ability to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere along the line, something shifted between Saint and I, where I'd be in a conversation with a client and I'd be like, that's so strange. Where did that thought come from?
Wow.
It didn't sound like something I would say.
Right.
And so I was exploring this with another medium, and she had suggested, signing on to do some training. And I had done for fun, like a little animal communication course sort of after I started opening up with my dog online. And, I had some basic foundational skills, but I never really I was not flexing it like a muscle at that time.
Right.
And so I start this mediumship training and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm like, there's just something that didn't feel quite right. I didn't feel motivated to sit down and connect with somebody, up, or meet them in the middle, being what a medium is. And I was getting these sort of infiltrating thoughts, and it just kind of clicked one day where I was like, I think Saint is the medium and I'm the translator.
Wow.
Right? So it's really different because I'm not an animal communicator. I don't know actually what to call this, or if there are other people like me out there. So what essentially happens is I connect with my own guides, the client's guides, and Saint's guides, and they give the messages to him, acts as the medium, and then I essentially translate those messages to the client. So this is like, hey, I'm calling the animal communicator because my dog seems off and I want to know what's going on with the dog. And I contact the vet and, those types of things. This is for the client.
Right.
So it's really different. And I can communicate with animals in that way too, but these messages are very specific. And the way that the way that I get them is either through words or through sentences or thoughts, or he'll show me an image of something. But the images, he likes to make it hard for me because they're often couldn't make it easy for me, right? They're often very metaphorical. So now that this has opened up, he often will show me the same image, but with different clients. And I have an understanding of what those images are. So for example, when I see a chessboard, right, that means that there's a lot of moving pieces for the client going on. And they're like, sometimes we have to unpack it together. Hey, this is what he's showing me. What does that mean to you? Right. And so
you find the clients are receptive to this?
Yeah. I know which ones are and which ones aren't.
Okay. That's fair.
I get everybody from the most logical, analytical to, the people who are really in the spiritual world and understand that world. And so you navigate it like many of us would, which is if the client's open and receptive, then you share that piece of your work with them. And, if they're not, that's totally fine too.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Again, another letting it flow and taking it as a call and response to what the client can handle, like a dance.
Yeah. And there's ways to do it too, right? So if the client, maybe isn't that receptive or open, but I'm seeing something or hearing something, I can reframe that in a different way that makes sense to that person.
And and that's where from my perspective, where the graduate degrees are really coming into play, because, it's like knowing how to phrase things and meeting people where they are is so key to the healing practitioner.
Yeah, exactly. So
go ahead.
It's really fun. It's really fun.
Yeah. And it's exciting that it's developing like this for you, and to see, you don't know where it's going to lead you. And it's like, ooh, magical mystery tour with Saint, and how your journey together is going to unfold.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular part of your job that is hard, like that you really is difficult, that you wish you couldn't, or could manage differently?
Being in a service industry, excuse me, my dog is.
Yeah, it's okay.
Chewing
Leah has a Bernese mountain dog puppy that is adorable.
Thank you. Yes. I'm going to give me 1 second. I'm just going to take that away so we don't get squeaker noise in the background. I think the hardest part is being so passionate about what I do because I've seen the results. And it's convincing people that this, whether it's the equine coaching that I do or some other capacity of coaching, that it's worth the investment. It's very hard for people to invest their time and their money into something. It sounds crazy, but it's hard for people to invest time and money in themselves.
Oh, no, I completely understand that. I deal with that in my client base all the time. It's like you have to spend and invest to reap the rewards, and for the gates to open up. And there's an initial cost setup cost.
Yeah. And We live in a world that, there's dopamine hijacking happening
Oh,
every 5 seconds. Just scroll through Instagram, or Facebook, and the ads that you're being served, click to buy, one click buying, right? I mean, the
right,
way our world is set up. And so to get people to commit to a process, not only for themselves, but one that is not an overnight or a quick fix, right? This
right.
is a journey. It takes time.
Yeah.
So that's probably the most challenging part. But it is why I love my clients so much, because they are so invested in themselves and to live a life that they really, haven't been living, and changing that for themselves.
Yeah, that is very well said, Leah. So if somebody wanted to pursue what your line of work is there a particular program that you would, or books, teachers, classes that you would recommend?
Sure. So this is not everybody, so this is just my personal opinion, but I am very big on accredited programs.
Yeah.
The coaching world is a little bit like the wild, wild west.
Yes. Yes.
Many certifications and programs out there. Some are better than others. So I would just recommend doing your research for somebody who wanted to explore the coaching path, and making sure that that program would be under the ICF, right? The International Federation for Coaches, because that's pretty much as close as you're going to get to, basically going through like a graduate school type program.
Right, right.
And then as far as equine programs, there's also a variety of those out there, and it sort of depends on what you're looking for. So I was having a really hard time sort of combining the two pieces, right? So on one side, I have, my master's degrees and my college education and the coaching certification. And then I have this 30 years of working with horses, but I don't really have anything that ties them all together.
Right.
And two people had sent me an interview on Coaches Rising, which is another podcast. And they were interviewing this woman named Kelly Wendorf. And she had just written a book, which I highly recommend, called Flying Lead Change.
So it's Kelly Wendorf. Yes. And the book is what?
Flying Lead Change.
Flying Lead Change.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, well, two people are sending me this. I should probably listen to.
Right. That's what I always tell clients all the time. If a message is coming to you 2 or more times, that is a direct tap to the universe to pay attention.
Yep. And so I guess I'll add this to your previous question too, of what's one of the harder parts of this work. And one of the hardest parts of this work is describing it in words.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And it's something that needs to be experienced to fully understand, how impactful it is. And so I'm listening to this interview and I'm like, oh my God, this woman is doing exactly what I do, but she has the words for it.
Yeah.
So I immediately bought the book, read the book, and then went on the website and saw that she has a training program, and that really combines. So you have to already be an ICF accredited and certified coach in order to even apply to be a part of this program. And she takes on 1 to 2 mentees a year, and I applied and was selected.
Perfect.
And so I actually just completed that whole training and certification last week.
Oh, congratulations.
So I am an Equus certified coach, as well as a professional certified coach. And I'm also an Equus Experience certified facilitator. So this is sort of an elite group of coaches and equine facilitators. And I think I'm the only one in New England now.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And remind everybody, you're in Ipswich, Massachusetts.
I am in Ipswich.
Yes. Okay. Which is on the North Shore of Boston. If you wanted to sign up for sessions with you. So that brings us to the end of our time together. And I could talk to you all day, literally. I mean, you are,
Me too.
the work is fascinating what you do. And to remind everybody, it's Leah Goldman, and her work is FIKA, FIKA coaching, FIKA coaching, and it's fikacoaching.com, FIKA coaching.com, contact at fikacoaching.com or Instagram, FIKA coaching. So that brings us to the end of our time together on Mystical Messages. Thank you, Leah, so much for joining me today. To learn more about Leah's work, please go to fikacoaching.com or to contact her to set up a session. To learn more about my work or to book a session with me, please visit hillaryharley.com. Thank you so much for listening today, and please join me again in 2 weeks when I will bring you the astrology forecast for the upcoming month. I wish you many blessings as you journey forward.